Hello, welcome to Mike's Mets Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bishota, and a happy Thursday to you. So, it is a happy Thursday because the New York Mets finally winning a game which was harder than one would expect with a team that is worth over $300 million, but, it's just the way it goes sometimes, and let's be happy about the fact that the Mets were able to stick it out. They win a very close 2-1 game over the Cincinnati Reds. Now, the caveat to this is that while it's nice to get a win, the Reds are not a good team. It probably shouldn't be this hard to defeat the Cincinnati Reds, and honestly, a 2-1 game really should have been closer to maybe 4-1, possibly 5-1. But as I said, just kind of the way it goes in this case. So we were treated to a great pitcher's duel in terms of potential and really kind of like future and past meeting together. So you had Justin Verlander for the Mets against Hunter Green for the Cincinnati Reds. And Hunter Green recently extended by the Reds. Green with the terrific fastball, but it hasn't really put together any sort of sustained success, unfortunately, because of this. And the result of it is he is sort of a pitcher that is incomplete. Incredible raw potential, but it's clearly no Justin Verlander, and Verlander made it very clear in this game, even though it was a very close one, that he is still Justin Verlander. He's the guy who can get things done and pitch a great game. And coming off a less than brilliant performance against the Tigers in his last start, this was an important performance for Justin Verlander. He goes 7 innings, allows only 2 hits, 1 earned run, strikes out 7, walks a pair. It was otherwise terrific, and was probably the sharpest pitching performance of the season so far. Gives it off to Adam Ottavino and David Robertson in the 8th and 9th. They saved the game, and the Mets stopped the skid, at least for now. And it's important to see the Mets come away with some of these games. Again, the Cincinnati Reds shouldn't be giving the Mets this much trouble, but it is just what it is. So we see very few highlights in this game. Again, it was a 2-1 victory. I will look at the biggest positive, which was Pete Alonso, again, homering. This puts him in pretty good shape in terms of the home run race. It's his 13th of the season, and he, by all accounts, has looked very good. He walked a pair of times in this game. I liked everything I saw from him in terms of his batting performance and his approach at the plate. And it's just been sort of a slug for Alonso, who's kind of slumped down after that really torrid start to begin the year. Brandon Nimmo would go 3 for 5 in this game. He keeps his batting average over 300. I don't know how long it's going to last, but it never ceases to delight me seeing Brandon Nimmo batting over 300. It's really wild to see, but it's great. And that was really it. You can really kind of hang your hat on those two performances. I mean, Daniel Vogelbach and Luis Guillorme both would total a pair of hits in this game. That was really it in terms of the performance, and it was just really about Verlander and Alonso's home run. The game-winning RBI would go to Nimmo when he drove in Luis Guillorme in the top of the 4th, and that was the end of the scoring for the remainder of the game. So a pitcher's duel, which we haven't been treated to that many times in the Mets season thus far, just because there's been so many blowouts and high-scoring games early on because of the lack of pitching ability so far during this year. We now have the Mets going on to try to finish off the series. They have a early start to this day, and that's why I'm recording so early in the morning. So it's going to start at 12:35 p.m. It'll be the final game of the Red Series, and it's going to be Kodai Senga going up against Drew Law. And it's an important game in terms of Mets still need to maintain some kind of consistency and performance. I would hope to see that they would maintain a level of direction in terms of what they're doing. It's just been a real back and forth season where they just keep going win one, lose one, and the result of it is a kind of off-balance season where no one can really sustain any kind of significant momentum going forward, regardless of how well they played the previous game. So the hope is that the Mets are starting to right themselves, and if they can grab a win, maybe win 2 in a row, get themselves back to 500, they can start the process of turning it around, because then they have the Nationals, and that's going to be a long series, 4 games against the Nationals on the road, before you go back home and play the Tampa Bay Rays, and you're going to get your ass kicked in that one, so you got to be prepared for it. So try to grab up as many wins as you can now. So the most important thing I've got to look at right now is Justin Verlander. The Mets really needed a great pitching performance from one of their starting pitchers, and it doesn't just help Verlander and the Mets, but it also helps the bullpen. It really helps everybody. And the performance that he gave was just a vintage Verlander performance. It's basically why you spend so much money on a pitcher like Verlander, even though he has the age, even though he has the potential injury risk. He's so critically important, especially with Max Scherzer struggling out the gate. Now he's hurt, and inconsistent performances from Kodai Senga and Joey Lucchesi and Tyler McGill and all the other Mets pitchers. And it's kind of led to this situation where the Mets are looking at their pitching depth and they're actually like, oh, actually, we're really lucky that we have Verlander here, because if we didn't, it would be another situation where they'd have to keep running out guys like Jose Budo and all these other pitchers, and you need to have your ace in there and to kind of right you in a situation where you need it, especially when your offense is not really consistently coming through. Again, the biggest note of the game was the fact that once again Starling Marte was completely absent from the scoring process. He's 0 for 4 again. He's now batting .216. He has a .565 OPS. It is pathetically bad. I really don't know what to say, because Marte was a guy that I would hang my hat on if he was in the lineup. He was so incredibly important for the Mets last year, and this year really lost. It's hard to say what exactly is wrong with him. He's certainly victim to some bad luck. I was looking at his hard hit percentages, and he and Lindor are both kind of getting screwed in some cases. Lindor, quiet game after hitting that big home run yesterday, but I liked the shift up in the lineup that Showalter is now going with, featuring Lindor earlier, then Lindor, McNeil at the second and third spot, and then Alonso, Beatty, and then finally Marte. It's tricky to say where exactly the Mets could get improvements. I think Vogelback's been fine. There's really nothing that can say about it other than he's just been perfectly average. He's not the reason why that they're struggling, although I would like someone a little bit more intimidating in the back of the lineup. But Vogelback's been fine. And it's just been the situations where they have to use Luis Guillorme, where it's kind of a mixed bag. Francisco Alvarez has not been very consistent after he hits 2 home runs yesterday. He comes back and goes 0 for 3 today, so he hasn't been super consistent in terms of that. The big news in terms of, not really big news, but the acquisition news was that the Mets had acquired former All-Star catcher Gary Sanchez on a minor league deal. We don't really know where exactly this puts the Mets in terms of where they want to use certain players. Remember, they still have Omar Narvaez, but as he is still currently out with that injury, the Mets are looking for more consistent offensive avenues, I believe, at the catcher position. This might lead them to part ways with Tomas Nido. Now, Nido, a great teammate, and I think he's a really important guy. He cannot be starting games. He's a backup catcher and a guy who should be coming in as a defensive replacement or something like that. It's really, you can't have him hitting in games. It's really just, you're going to feel it heavily in terms of your offense in the box score. He just is really, really bad at hitting. And when he does get hits, you're like, oh, okay, that's great. But he's just a really, really problematic player. A great defensive player. I think he's great behind the plate, and he really treats the pitching staff well. But a lot of trouble with him. And so acquiring Sanchez does seem to lend credence to the fact that they might be doing some other change-ups in terms of the catching position. They may potentially go some way with bringing him in, possibly to replace Nito. Maybe they need to send down Alvarez. I would prefer they don't do that. I feel like that would hurt Alvarez's overall development even more so. So I think they should stick it out with Alvarez, who's shown some bright spots in what has been otherwise a pretty inconsistent call-up thus far. I'm just still kind of waiting for him to kind of put it together. As we all know, he's very, very talented, but has not really shown it that much early on in the year. So in conclusion, really what we're looking at was a much-needed win, much-needed pitching performance, and now they need to come up with more consistent offense and a solid performance. We're hoping from Kodai Senga, who's going to be facing the Reds for the first time. Senga has, by somewhat default, become sort of the Mets pitching ace in lieu of Scherzer pitching well, and when Verlander was out. Now Verlander's back, and Senga's going to kind of fall into more of a two role at the moment, but he's been otherwise probably the Mets' most consistent pitcher, even though his performances have been less than consistent. He's just been coming away with wins, but he's got to clean up his mechanics. He's got to clean up a lot of what he's been doing. And after yesterday's loss, after Wednesday's loss, Tuesday's loss, after Tuesday's loss, we have to wonder what exactly is Jeremy Hefner's overall role in the organization going forward. He's got to be looked at as a potential scapegoat early on in the year, because they have overall struggled, and other than making pitching replacements, call-ups, and send-downs, he and Billy Epler have got to be looked at as huge problems for the organization. Epler has got to be on a very short leash at the moment. He constructed a team that people were fawning over earlier on in the year, I myself included, but has turned out to be an absolute wreck, and just in terms of how much trouble could you get into. But it's hard to say that Epler had that many bare choices, and everything he didn't do and did do has basically worked out as we expected. The problem has just been injuries, which you can never really take into account, but you really have to improve your pitching depth in those cases. And what the Mets have was, or what they thought they had, was at least solid depth. As it turns out, pitchers who they were counting on to be the backups did not pitch particularly well. I'm looking at you, David Pearson. So we have a situation where Epler probably did as much as he could do, but I've never made it, particularly hidden my distaste for Epler. I think Epler is, by and large, an over-age GM. It's going to be important for him to kind of show how much of a dynamic general manager he can be, especially in these turbulent times with the Mets. And he's going to have to try and feel out how exactly Steve Cohen is going to want to proceed at this point, because Cohen has already sunk a lot of money into this team. It's not exactly a drop in a bucket, but certainly Cohen could take on more financial responsibility if he needed to, but I don't see Cohen really wanting to go out and spend more money unless he really has to. So it's going to be tricky for Epler, because I think that really is Epler's best characteristic, is his ability to find free agents and acquire them and make it clear that this is a good place for them to play. He's not so good with the development and trading of talent. So we'll see how exactly he wants to proceed, and we're hoping he won't really dump the farm, but the Mets do need some help going on this year. It's clear that this roster, as currently constructed, and even if you have all of your players come back healthy, I don't know if this team, from what they've shown so far, can actually contend in October. We have to see how everyone performs when they're come back with a full deck. But it's tricky to say how exactly they want to proceed at this point. So at the moment, we can only say thank God for the Mets winning last night. It was a very important win. I can only say that Justin Verlander, we thank you very much for your terrific performance. It was a much needed and much long-awaited performance, and we hope he stays healthy and he stays as consistently brilliant as he was last night. So congratulations, Justin Verlander. You really made yourself an mat last night. Thank you for listening to Mike Spence Podcast. Please be sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Finally, please also follow the podcast Twitter, which is Mike Spence Pod, all one word. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Let's go, Mets.